Hello and welcome to FireDEV, a fireside chat with great people in the industry. And today I have Vlad-Stefan Gheorghe with me. And do you want to do a little introduction, Vlad?
Yeah. Hi. Nice to meet you. Thank you for the invitation. First of all, I'm happy to have a platform such as this one to be able to engage in meaningful conversations and maybe learn more about the industry. Um, a little bit about myself. I come from gaming with a pretty big experience with mobile gaming in particular. Um, I've gone through companies such as Electronic Arts, where I actually started my work, starting from QA, from testing, where a lot of people start their careers. Um, it's been a pretty interesting ride so far, and it still is. Lots to learn. After Electronic Arts, I saw an opportunity at King. There was a studio in Bucharest back then. I applied and eventually got in. Um, Afterwards, after a few months, like 6 or 8 months, I think, there was some sort of an internal contest, and I got to take a good seat, like a golden seat, to move to Stockholm, to relocate to Stockholm, and be a part of that time. I was not aware what project that would be. So it turned out to be the next Candy Crush title that they were planning to release, called Candy Crush Soda Saga. Um, yeah, that was the beginning of a very interesting and continuous learning path for me, and it still is. Although I'm in a different company in a different country. After King, I moved to Romania. I was thinking of relocating to Barcelona for so many reasons. I think you can imagine. Um, so afterwards, I thought to relocate back to Romania to build something. Um, and part of the vision was to build an academy, some sort of an academy, maybe not specifically that, but a platform, a forum, a place where people can learn, can grow their skills, and maybe even get certified for that or validated that they have that type of knowledge or they gain that type of knowledge. And then use it to grow, use it to get better jobs, to negotiate better, depending on everybody. Um, and I did my homework and due diligence, as I try to always do, specifically when joining a new company. It's pretty important. So I found Amber Studio, which was a pretty small studio back then, not even 100 people. Um, and then I joined, and they were really happy to have me. I was super happy to be a part of the team and to learn of their plans for growing and expanding and basically turning it what it is today. To give you an idea, from 2013 up to today, from 3 employees, it went up to 1,200. So it was a pretty interesting growth that I got to be that I got to witness, to be a part of, to invest in, and to collaborate with my colleagues and peers.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean that's some crazy growth. We'll unpack the amber side of your career, which is currently where you're at in a moment. So, like I said, you worked at EA for almost 2 years, and you was a QA tester there.
Yeah,
How did you get the job at EA, and what was like that interview process like? If you had an interview.
I did have an interview. I was surprised that were not more than one interview. Back then, I think it was only one, from what I remember. Um, it's pretty interesting how I got the job. I knew a guy that worked as a tester, and I very much needed a, like, even a summer job or some form of income for that period. So I asked him politely, "Can you do you have any jobs available for what you're doing, would I even be able to do that? Because newsflash, I was never a gamer.
Okay.
I had games, I had consoles, I had like Nintendos and other things for sure, but I never had like the best computer, like something performant to be able to play all those things, that all the games that were coming out, and or PS4 or all these things. So I didn't get to develop the passion to spend more time than I could playing games. Today I like to think that I'm more of a gamer than I was. Yeah, so he kind of helped me understand a few, and he explained, and I looked at videos online about games in general. The interview was fairly easy, and I got in. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. And like, what sort of questions did they ask on the interview process, and how long was the interview for something like a tester?
I think it was in total of 1 hour, and in the first half hour they were only speaking to me and asking very easy questions, like, and also speaking in English so they can understand of my English skills, because I needed to report bugs and only in English. Everything was in English, and it's pretty much everywhere for companies that have like a global presence, or they're multicultural. So to get back to your point, to your question, um, it depends. It depends. Traditionally, what they do or what happens is the first half of the interview, you have a bunch of questions asked, basically, and then the other half of hour, basically, it's they give you a device or an iPod, or they gave me like an iPhone 4, I think, back then, so I can test anything out of it and basically start reporting bugs however I thought a bug should be reported. It didn't matter how bad or good you were doing it. They were just trying to see how much of it you can do, because I had no experience back then. So it was okay. It was a fair challenge, and I liked it. I thought it was nice.
Okay, so those games that you were, testing during your interview process, were they, actual games they were developing or had developed, or they just random ones off the App Store?
No, no. So they had their own. Of course, it's Electronic Arts, so they have so many IPs that they can choose from. I think it was a racing game, if I remember correctly, and I think it was a Need for Speed game that was previously released like 2 years prior to that interview. It was a alpha build that had issues in particular on purpose, basically, and they had a console option, so you can restart playing that on and on and on. So probably they adapted some sort of build specifically for tester interviews. Now that I know what's going on years later, um, that's my guess.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense that they would have, a specific build because, if they gave the latest build, it might not be very, buggy. So
Yeah.
it's not necessarily, the best thing to use. Okay, that's, you know, fair enough. And what was your experience like working at EA? Because EA doesn't have the best of reputations. So, like, what was your experience like firsthand?
You know how it always depends. Like, the company itself is not the problem, it's leadership usually, and bad management or toxic management or
Yeah.
any other word you want to use. My experience was difficult in the beginning because I had no knowledge of anything, basically. I haven't had seen um, like the settings part of an Android in depth, or what iOS looks like in settings, or how do you do stuff on iOS, like how do you even install something. So it was very nice and kind of a continuous learning experience until I left. Um, it was interesting. The worst part was that I could never switch from the night shift to the day shift, and you can imagine that it created quite a few um, situations that were not so favorable for me. Like in my personal life, I didn't have time. I was always tired. I was always on the go because I was sleeping during the day and starting to work at half past 6 p.m. or something. It was far, and yeah, that was a bit unpleasant, but that has nothing to do with the company.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough. So why was you, or why was the company having, night shifts? Because it's not like a security company where you need people
Mhm.
securing the, let's say, building day and night, or a support team necessarily where you need to be on the phones day and night. So why was they doing QA testing at night time?
Yeah, that's a good question. But that's a simple answer. Um, Distributed teams doing specific actions. So to give you an example, let's say the development team for, I don't know what game, Need for Speed. Just let's just say that for an example. Maybe the entire development team for that game was in Canada, but they didn't have testers in Canada or enough testers, regression testers that we were. So they had to use, let's say, quote unquote, external resources, distributed resources. So they would reach out to studios that would have, it's a common practice actually for studios that have multiple multiple locations and the same type of service.
Okay, yeah, I mean that's fair enough.
Yeah, and it's
And
also due to the time difference because if the development teams and studios are located in USA, for instance, then you would have a time difference of 8 to 9 hours that you need to sync on.
yeah, I mean, yeah, that's fair enough as well. Yeah, because obviously
Hmm.
you got to be. I mean, it's one thing, doing it as a one off where you can do in a different, time, and then you just loop them back in on the next meeting. But if it's every day, then you need to be able to get your feedback, get it to them, they get it to you, back and forth a few times in
Yes.
the day. Otherwise, instead of 4 or 5 times back and forth, it's like max once because you're asleep, they're asleep. Whilst each of you are working respectively. So yeah, I mean that's fair enough. That makes sense. And how much QA testing does EA do? Would you say? Because you've worked at a few companies now. Like, how intense is their QA?
Um, so I think you had two questions here, like how intense or what was the other one? Sorry.
No, just over like how much QA testing do they do? Like how much emphasis and how important is QA
Oh, a
testing
lot,
for
a
for
lot,
for EA?
a lot, a lot. I would say they're doing an amazing job, and people over there are doing a tremendous job and doing with all types of testing, basically. Because there are new types of testers nowadays. It's not only regression testing; it's dev QA, it's automation, it's many other types of testing. So I think they are doing a great job. I can't speak for the latest titles in the past years. There have been bugs, of course, but that's with any other type of software.
Yeah,
So
I mean, yeah,
yeah,
fair enough.
yeah. In terms of testing, I have only thumbs up.
Okay, that's good to hear then. And what sort of tools did EA, leverage and use for their testing to help, enhance it, or did they just use like a spreadsheet?
Uh, Besides spreadsheets and other things, I can't remember correctly what the name it was, but one of the tools that we were working with in collaboration with the development team. So some bugs were recorded in test rails, some bugs were in Jira, some bugs were. It depends on the tool that they were using, basically.
Okay.
They had like two or three max. Yeah.
Okay. And what type? Because you mentioned Need for Speed. Was that the only title that you worked on was the EA, or did you work on other ones as well?
Other projects, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I worked on a variety of titles for 1.5 years or however long I was there. From Need for Speed to Real Racing to FIFA Ultimate Team when it was just created back then. Um, it was, I can't remember. I think Bejeweled. There was another game. Yeah, Madden, like American football. And that was a fun game to learn.
I can imagine.
Yeah, I
Well,
didn't know the rules in particular, so the game helped. And being on it for quite a while, I had to learn them. So it was an it was a nice experience, yeah, and fun for the most part.
that's good then. And how did EA's approach to testing differ on mobile versus more traditional platform like console?
Like consoles. Hmm.
Yeah.
So because of the nature of the mobile industry and how everything works, everything is so much faster. Everything has to be released so much earlier or sooner, or it has to be frequent releases. Whereas in console, you have a very different rhythm. You work for a long time where you don't release anything, but then you release that title. You maybe have a DLC, you maybe have patches and stuff, but that's about it usually. Of course, it can vary. Nowadays, you have many other types of components, let's say, to to products, such as live op events, such as shops, and like all sorts of conversion methods implemented by business intelligence and product owners.
Okay. And like, did you work on any titles at EA that got cancelled?
Not at Electronic Arts.
Not at EA. Okay.
No, they had all their internal portfolio of games, and they had everything already planned by the time it even got to QA. So trust me, they were really sure they want to release that, or they were just unsure of how safe was that particular version increment that they wanted to release to an already released title usually. Or I got to be almost a part of in sync with the development team. Like we were helping them, they were throwing bugs at us, and we were helping them with that. Um, but that's about it. I had no canceled projects or
Okay.
unreleased titles. Yeah.
Okay. And like, obviously, I'm a developer. I've
hmm
seen setups for developers and artists. What was the setup at EA like for testers? Was there like a tester room where you had a bunch of screens, consoles? Like, what was the
Yeah.
whole tester setup like?
It was pretty straightforward, as I think it was the entire floor, or however many floors they had of testers. There was a majority of testers, at least when I was there in the building, versus development teams. I think there were different support or shared departments also in the building working. Um, it was a cubicle form, like with some small walls, so you could have just a bit of privacy, but nothing too big. Like you couldn't see each other next to each other. After a while, I think they changed the furniture and the walls were no longer there. It was just like I don't know. You had two desks, one next to each other, and then you had another pair of desks that were facing you. And then you had like a platform between them, but that's the most you would have. It was pretty open space. Yeah.
Okay. And so yeah, at EA you were the QA tester, then a senior QA tester. How
Yep.
much actual testing does a senior QA do versus managing, let's say, a team and doing other tasks?
So like with any other progress you want to make in your career, you usually have to start somewhere. So at least in that particular scenario, you had to start as taking more responsibility first, and then also doing the job that you need to do, and that was testing, or part-time coordinating, or part-time helping the test lead coordinate testing efforts, nothing more. Gathering, doing checks on the entire team, on or some people in the team, or it depended really. Um, then there was no QA lead, I think, for a while. So the senior tester meant you had to take accountability, or it was needed for somebody to step up to be an active test lead for a while, and that was a bit unpleasant in the terms of I didn't really see that much progress for myself. I didn't see an opportunity for learning the way I envisioned and the way I felt I needed. So I had to stop it there, and that's why I sought different opportunities where I found King.
Okay. So Tomac King, you worked there for over 4 years. What
hmm
was that like, and how did you get that job, and what did you specifically do there?
Oh man, that was a roller coaster ride and a dream job, to be honest. Um, so to start from the beginning, I think there was a series of interviews that I took part of in Bucharest when I after I joined King. They were really particular with the people that they were hiring. They had a very well thought process of uh, recruitment, interviews, and they were following things like on point, looking on the paper and taking notes and giving each other feedback. And it was a very new, very, very pleasant experience from the beginning to witness such change, such openness towards hearing the other person. And it felt radically different from the it wasn't chaos, it was just very emergent, and it was very time boxed with electronic arts. The nature of the job requires you have a time box type of work, because you have, you know however many hours, you have 8 hours per day. So you need to make it work somehow, and you need to test everything that's needed. um yeah, and it can get pretty stressful and tight at times. um It was all very different in King, and it was a pleasant experience, and I felt pretty proud to be able to get that achievement for myself, because I looked up to them, to be honest. Then there was the series of interviews I was telling you about, uh, and some people also left from that studio, and I also left as a part of a relocation package and to move to Stockholm in Sweden. Um, yeah, and then I got to learn of the project that I was on. um, it was a immediate, greater sense of achievement, so to say. To give you a bit of details without giving anything from the inside, that probably I shouldn't. um, their studio and the studios were made like you would enter Candy Crush Paradise, or you would enter Candy Crush. I think you can find this online. I think you can find pictures. I think you can find stuff online that would show you a bit of insight on how their studios are set up, how however many colors they have, and a lot of branding, and it's super powerful. It makes you feel, and the Swedish culture also helps a lot with that. Helped a lot with the company's culture. Yeah.
Okay. And like, how did you get the job?
I had a friend who just got in there, um, working as an analyst as well, and he told me about. We were also colleagues in Electronic Arts. We shared, I think, a project together at some point, and we became friends. Yeah, and he told me about this great place he's working at, and people are like this, and I didn't take him that much seriously, too seriously in the beginning, because people can exaggerate sometimes, and
Of course.
you tend to not believe that it's a good experience versus the average experience that some people at least have, and personally I had as well. So I became more and more interested as he was telling me more things, or he was posting pictures on Facebook or something like that, and I was seeing like this guy is going everywhere. Okay, not to mention that he's having fun at his workplace. So I immediately wanted to take my shot. He said that there might be seats available. Of course, he made a recommendation. I updated my CV, and then I sent it to him, and yeah, I was called for an interview. Actually, there were six interviews in total, because I told you they have a very meticulous process of seeing how you resonate with their values and principles and culture and all the aspects that are very healthy to take in consideration, actually.
Okay, and what were those interview stages like? What was the process like?
Oh, it was quite a while ago, so I can't really remember too many particularities. Um, Besides what I just said, like they would have they would try to measure and see how much you would embody certain values that they had, company values. Um, Probably some control questions, to or some trick questions. Um, yeah, and then they talked to me and asked me about myself. They wanted to get to know me, and then they talked about their area. Like the QA manager talked about his job a bit and about himself, and how his role is impacting everybody in a positive way, and what the constraints are, and those kind of things. I thought, although it was a long process of recruitment and until I finally got hired, I still thought it was. I still respected the process.
Okay, and you said you worked on Candy Crush. Did you work on any other non Candy Crush titles at King?
Um, yes, for a non-release title. So, as I said, in Electronic Arts, I didn't get to be a part of that. In King, I was a part of a few unreleased titles or undeveloped or canceled projects. Um, but that was for quite a not such a long time. But the main titles, yes, were the two Candy Crush games, the one in Stockholm, Candy Crush Soda, which is the second biggest title in their portfolio, and then the third one, Candy Crush Jelly Saga, which is the third one released after Soda. They now have four, I think, or more. I can't speak because I haven't looked at those games for quite a while. I do still have Candy Crush on my phone though, and I go to it every now and then.
Okay, yeah, that's nice. And what what sort of employee benefits did King give? Because King, it's a huge company now, and Candy Crush, brings in a lot of, even still to this day, brings in a lot of money for King. So I'm guessing they probably provided some nice benefits to their employees.
I'll tell you this. Besides fruits and everything in the office and a fun office and colorful one that I already mentioned, um, I will tell you that it was sometimes it felt like more than enough. But when you look at the industry standards, not locally, like in Europe or like big companies like Microsoft or Blizzard or other places,
Companies like in
you,
Silicon Valley,
you
like Google,
yeah,
etc.
no, yeah, maybe those are too high.
Okay.
They're kind of an isolated exception, like a top exception. But as you go down, you see that there is quite a bit of difference between an average and what King was doing for people. So I would say King cared a lot about their culture, so that meant they invested a lot in people, and that showed in many areas. I'll tell you that I was very okay. Everybody was.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
And because obviously there's so many mobile titles out there, there's so much competition. How
Yeah.
did King try and stay, and they seem to be succeeding still to this day, stay on top of all that competition? And did they, regularly download other games that were popular from studios like Ketchup or EA or
Yeah.
whoever, and try and either copy or learn from those studios?
Yeah. Pokemon Go came out, and
Exactly.
so many big titles came out
Yeah.
um, on app stores.
Clash of Clans as well. I remember that was at a similar time when Candy Crush came out. So all those titles were making
Yeah.
huge amounts of money.
Well, what I can tell you is that from what I've seen and learned about the experience there, is I saw an alignment, at least in a few areas related to how to build Candy Crush, how to build a franchise, how to expand, and so on and so on and so on. There was a willingness and not perfect sync, but it was alignment between people that were coming into the company and leadership and business as well. So it was this functioning trio that was working, and it was all about the people that got to be creative, got to be innovative. It was all about the business people that were really taking their time and considering everything and everybody's point, um, and product people, leadership people, which were listening to all the other areas and their own opinion, and probably other aspects as well. So they were really invested in getting literally the best result, also while practicing healthy processes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've heard the gaming industry is notorious for paying, at least developers and I think artists less than what they probably could get at, an equivalent tech company. How is that like for QA testers? What's the QA tester pay like at companies like EA and King compared to if you was to go to a tech company?
Um, there's a difference. I'll tell you this in a few words. But I think we also need to take into consideration that there's such a big difference in the nature of the business in both areas, as well as the nature of the work. So one can be emergent or needs to be emergent. One can be predictable and can do like waterfall and doesn't need to do agile, and all these particularities factor in basically. Um, I think there's a difference, but there's also a difference because the industries cannot compare. Like me as a hiring manager in my company, I face this issue quite a lot. And the issue is, it's either I have people in my team that are approached by HR representatives from other companies, and guess what? It's a bank company, it's an automotive company, it's any other tech company that would automatically have higher pay, because the nature of the business is like the volume is much more consumed and much more distributed. So of course the revenue would be much higher. Then again, it depends how each company's leadership uh, manages that profit and income.
Okay, that's fair enough. It's good to hear, your opinion on it. So, most recently, you're at Amber. Tell us about that and what Amber does, because I feel like a lot of listeners will have heard of EA and King, but Amber maybe not.
It's interesting you say that they might have heard about King, because my strange experience was that people don't really know that much about. Probably they do today, but when I was working there, if I said King, they were like, "Okay, go on. What else?" Candy Crush. Oh, okay. So basically, what I'm trying to say is the Candy Crush brand was so powerful
Hmm.
and so widespread that it minimized the King brand. And of course, they promoted this everywhere and king, king, king everywhere. But still, people were that was their source. Can you stop for a second?
Yeah, that's fine.
Can you hear the noise here?
No, no, it's gone now.
Oh, but it might start again because okay. Yeah, there you go. So apparently in Romania, there's this strange bad habit from neighbors to just not care about anybody and just start drilling into walls, man. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And I think this is a downside from not being at work, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I guess fair enough. So yeah, like we were saying, you're at Amber. Tell us about that and what they do.
So Ember is interestingly not a game development company, but it's a game development services, but not limited to, for gaming, for games, for products that can be gamified. From they have a range of services from full development products to co-development to porting to specific art projects. Uh, all these we're doing with partners and clients. We have tried some uh, original IPs that were ours and are still ours. Uh, we have a lot to learn, of course, with each release. But I think everybody's more than proud that we have achieved that. Not being a game development company, I repeat, it's quite tough to be an agency for development services, specifically even in gaming and in mobile, um, and build something because it comes down to revenue, right, and profit. So I think that was pretty good. That we had the opportunity to have those pockets of opportunity, let's say, pockets of money, basically, to be able to develop our own IPs, and we still have that in plan. I can't reveal anything, of course, but I know for sure that we are more than interested and invested in building this for ourselves.
Okay. And I've noticed this. I see a lot of top tier people that work at companies like King, EA, Ubisoft.
Yeah,
They go over to Amber. Like there's been a few people that I've been talking to come onto the podcast. Yourself being one, and a few others,
yeah.
and they're currently working at Amber. Like, what is it about Amber that's attracting people? Would you say?
I think there are a few things. At least that's what I've learned so far. Um, and I think they're in no particular order. Oh, sorry, the noise.
It's fine.
Um, should we take a pause or
No, no, we can carry on. It seems like this individual wants to keep drilling or for the rest of the day. So it's fine.
can you
Carry
can
on.
clean that in post?
I can try and clean it, as much as possible, but I can still hear it well, your voice, so it's
Oh,
not too bad.
okay. I'm trying to be as close to the mic as possible. Okay, let's restart the segment.
Okay, yeah, so I was just saying, you see a lot of top tier people. They go over to King, EA. No, I mean, sorry. They go from King, EA, Ubisoft over to Amber. Like, what is it about
Yeah,
Amber
yeah,
that's, attracting people? I'm seeing it a lot on LinkedIn because that's how I'm communicating with people to get them onto the FireDEV podcast. And the man that I'm seeing, and people from all these big studios that generally you would think that people would want to go there and that will be it for them. And they're going to Amber. And I hadn't really heard of Amber that long ago. So,
yeah.
like, what's drawing people away from these studios? It's not one studio, it's a multiple, studios, like to Amber. And you said Amber's grown for what, like 3 people about 10 years ago to 1,000 people now?
It's 1,200 people, I think, in many locations across the world. Um, yeah, you can find this on our website. Um, yeah, take a look.
Okay, that's
Maybe it's interesting. You'll find the full history there, and of course many particularities. Uh, so yeah, it's grown a lot. Initially, of course, there were only three people that started this, and they came from Electronic Arts, from the same Electronic Arts studio that I used to be a tester in. Just to give you a reference.
okay.
Yeah, or they had business to do with that studio. Depends on the person now, because people come from different areas of business, even if they come from Electronic Arts or Ubisoft or Gameloft or any other company or King. Yeah. So why people are people coming to Amber? First of all, it's familiarity for people that have worked with each other in the past. Like, for instance, for executives, like our chairman Mihai Pohonțu, is basically drawing a lot of people in. A lot of people want to be a part of this, and they want to have a opportunity to work with Mihai. They work maybe with him and many other colleagues in the leadership team. They have worked together in the past. They had very nice experiences, and or they didn't get to work that much in the past, and they saw this as a great opportunity. Like, I would want to work with Vlad because in King I didn't have a chance to be on to work on issues like this. We were, he was doing art or I was doing Scrum Master job, and it was quite different. So, and the next thing is the opportunity, the vast opportunity of developing and also learning to develop um, such a large variety of games, such a large variety of games, from small iterations, small things to basically full product that can go to 1 to 2 years.
Okay. Fair enough. And so you're talking about, your experience, from all these companies. What tools would you recommend for a gaming startup to enhance their, productivity, their workflow, and which tools or types of tools would you would you say to stay away from?
Um, okay, for companies that are starting up, that's an interesting. That's a good question. I will answer with no particular brand, no particular software. Whatever helps the most, but it has to also help the others understand the information there. Like if it's a Google spreadsheet, make it shareable, make it online. If it's Jira, if it's Trello, if it's whatever people want to use, um, that would be my recommendation. It has to make sense. It has to be easy to use in the beginning. It can get more complex afterwards, but at least in the beginning, for startups, for people that are starting out or just starting the job in project management or Scrum Master or any other project management role, um, I would recommend just starting with something simple, something to teach you the exercise of moving tasks around, seeing everything in columns, looking at the Kanban board, looking at the Scrum board, looking at a backlog, and just getting familiar with simple concepts and also learning on the side.
Okay. And
Yeah.
are there any tools that you would say stay away from just because they're just not suited or they're just too overcomplicated when you're
Yeah.
so small?
Of course, it depends on everybody's capacity for learning tech and tools and how to configure them and how to operate them. Um, Probably if you're like a tester starting out in the business, don't go to test rail. I think that's super complex and very, very, um, it can get to many deep layers. Um, Jira has shown to be very difficult to understand, because it has so many options and you can customize it in so many hundreds of ways. And people going from a company to another, of course, they will not see the same practice. Of course, they will not see the same workflow. Of course, they will not see the same configuration. So many times when you switch from a company to another, or even as a company starting out, you probably want to adapt to some industry standard tool that your clients are working with, or you want to work with if you're self-funded and you're developing products for yourself. I would say stay away from complicated tools that have so many options that make you derive from the simplicity of the act.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a fair enough point. Because if, let's say, like you're saying, the act, if the act literally is to, set a task, let's say for yourself, and it's a 5 word task with like a couple of lines of description, and that's all you need
Yeah,
because there's only like two of you, on the team, and then you don't really need, tracking of hours, tracking
yes,
of
of course.
sprints, tracking of, epics, tracking of, this and that, and every little thing that you can see on Jira, and then all the customization on top of it, because you might end up spending an hour possibly,
Yeah,
or hours a week trying to just set these options, whereas you could maybe do 2 or 3 of those tasks out of, let's say, 10 tasks a week, just from the time that you wasted on trying to customize those options. So yeah, you're right, it depends on what you're doing, and if it's taken away from time, then definitely. So tools, like you said, tools like Jira are pretty complex. They can be overkill for small companies, especially really fast moving companies.
not necessarily.
You don't
Not
think so?
necessarily. I've seen no. I've been in startups and in small companies that were, I think, 10, 20, 30 people at most, and they already knew how to operate Jira to their best ability, of course, and for that specific need that they had. And it wasn't too complex. The need wasn't too complex for them. So they didn't need to go that far into learning themselves. They had projects configured, they had almost everything done. When I came in, I just coached the team and coached the product owner and the business owner, and that's kind of it. Everything was set up. So it can be that. It can be that. It depends the people that you have inside, because you can get this one person that knows the entire system and can already help you with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Or you
yeah.
don't, and you just build it yourself, however you can.
Okay, so for that example, that startup example, did they, the people working on there, did they come from an environment where they already knew it, or did a lot of them learn it at that company and they just managed to do it really well?
Both. I
Both.
would say both. Yeah, yeah,
Okay, so in the scenario where, let's say 5, maybe 10 people, where they never use a tool like that, maybe they're not that far out of university, they've
yeah,
had the odd job here and there, but they haven't used those tools. What other tools would you recommend? Because obviously there's tools like Trello, for example, which
yeah. That's
doesn't
great.
obviously offer a great deal of customization, but it's more than enough just to track tasks.
Yeah.
And then the spreadsheets, and some people I know that you still use pen and paper heavily. Like, what tools would you recommend?
As I think, as you said, and that's a great question. I wanted to get to that point as well. Um, it's about simplicity. So it can start from a simple pen and paper. It can start as simple as, I don't know, just writing things in boxes on a piece of paper and just grouping them in a singular task. Let's say you just draw a line around them, and that's a task. You don't need anything else. If you have like you want to invest in something really minimal, you can just get a pack of post-its. You don't have to have a whiteboard. You don't have to have all these things at your place or at your office. They stick to anything, specifically your desk or your monitor, or you can get creative with that, of course. So you can even have those. I saw many teams sticking post-its on windows in meeting rooms, and they work just fine. So it can get as simple as that. Yeah. But what I would not recommend is trying to memorize and assume that basically the team already knows what they need to work on, or everybody knows that what they need to do. That's that's very risky. I would recommend not going that path, the memory path, or the trust path.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. I think unless there's maybe just two of you, and those two, let's say one's, a programmer, one's an artist, and let's say half the tasks are, developer, or half the tasks are, art related, then it's a pretty easy to know, who's doing what. Obviously, you still probably need some structure of which tasks to do first and priority, but you can, it's not as important. But obviously, once you get into, let's say, 10, 15 people, they say multiple coders, multiple designers, multiple this, that. Yeah, definitely having some sort of structure where you're saying, you guys handle this or you handle this. This is the priority. Discuss it with them is definitely very important. But like you
Yeah.
said, having a system that will work and repeatedly work. Because I remember speaking to a friend of mine a couple of years ago, and I remember we would always try different, note taking apps and tools. And I remember asking him,
Hmm.
what's the current note taking app you're using? And he said,
Yeah, exactly.
he said to me, pen and paper. He said, that shit never needs an update. Like, it just
Yeah,
works. I put the
it
pen
just
to,
works.
yeah.
Exactly.
I was
Yeah.
like, I was like, you've got a point. As long as your pen has ink, it just works.
Man, you can use anything nowadays.
Mm.
Literally anything that leaves a mark on a paper.
Oh
It's as
yeah,
simple as that. It's as simple as taking notes on your phone. Everybody has a phone nowadays.
yeah,
It's as simple as that. Everybody has a note function or a note app. Or if not, you can just install one. There are many on app stores. So it depends, I think, on how willing you are to adopt that type of um, work ethic or way of working, so to say.
yeah. I think that's fair enough. Okay, so talking about like agile and Scrum, why has agile and Scrum become so popular with companies all around the world, and what does it bring to the team that other methodologies don't?
Ooh, interesting. You're getting to the spicy questions.
Yeah,
I like it. I think there are two very main reasons, big reasons that I could learn so far, at least. Um, Unfortunately, I think the majority of objective or need for adoption of agile or agile transformation, as many companies are doing today, is because it's cool, or because other companies are doing it, or because stakeholders or other people, key people in the company, have learned about some aspects of it. There's still nowadays a big confusion from leadership to any role, basically. To give you an example, agile equals Scrum. So there's still, like, they're synonyms, but they're not. They're very different things. So even giving that small example is something we need to start improving on when we think about that. But the success, as a second reason for the adoption of this, is it actually works better. But it works better because of the nature of the markets of products. Nowadays everything is so accelerated, and I don't mean speed. I also mean speed, but I mean fast decision making, planning for very frequent small releases. Like, you're looking at mobile industry, you have to have frequent releases. So what's related, what can offer this type of releases to meet your demands? When you look at methodologies and frameworks, you find that maybe the most appropriate is Scrum or Kanban as a working methodology. Or it really depends on the nature of the project or product and the company, how that's set up to deliver those.
yeah. I mean, I like that you made the point that agile, again, I'm not saying they're the same, but
Mhm.
they can sometimes go hand in hand. Agile and Scrum, because it's popular, companies are jumping on board. So yeah, because
Yeah,
sometimes I do see companies and I feel like they're adopting it, even though it might work out, not from the perspective of, oh, they analyzed it and they felt like this was the best thing to do, but because it's the in thing, and it's a lot easier to say to your manager or your higher up, we're going to go down this route, instead of this alternative route, or make something up ourselves, because it's a safer bet. Everyone else is doing this company's doing it, this company's doing it, and then the
yeah,
manager's thinking, oh yeah, I've heard of those companies, I like those companies, we want to emulate their success, so yeah, let's go with it. So yeah, I think it's good that you made that point, even though you're obviously invested and you're around those techniques, to acknowledge that sometimes it is just because it's popular.
yeah. Sometimes it's because of that. But there is a third option here. It's internal. So coming from the inside, from, let's say, bottom up, leadership becomes aware of this proposal. Let's become agile. Let's start working in this way, and etc. etc. So you have a lot of people within the company already giving you buy-in, already proposing to leadership. That's super rare and that's not so common. But again, it also divides into two options here. And one, it gets implemented the happy path and it works and they actually learn and they develop. But the other most common one is it gets proposed, it it's not actually understood. Biases are put in place, and at the end of the day, if we have an emergent way of working, so to say, and people management and product delivery, you will not really be able to have even the time or the focus to be able to dedicate dedicate learning hours or go to trainings or actually, what's the Scrum thing about, or why are they doing sprint planning in that way, or what is this with points, and there's so many aspects that are picked on, and it results in a cherry picked framework um, that is most commonly probably dysfunctional.
Okay. And at what point in a company's journey and size should it really focus on these methodologies like Scrum and other stuff? Because if, let's say, you're starting out, you've barely got an idea, you're one or two people, I think
That's great.
heavy.
Yeah, that's great. If you don't have an idea, then when you look at frameworks and methodologies, you'll find that um, Scrum is perfect for that. It helps you iterate, it helps you explore. You basically need to release whenever you plan to release. Let's say if you're building your own product, like we are doing at Amber, you have to have a release date, an end date for that project commitment.
Okay, so you think it should be used even if you're, let's say, you dropped out of your job and you're looking to create your own startup. You don't have anything right now, and you're just trying to figure things out. You think these tech methodologies should be used from the start?
It depends on your experience to apply those, because I'm not sure I said before, but Scrum being a framework and nothing more. It's not a set of rules on how to do things. It's a frame. It's like a box, and then within that box, you get to develop, you get to create, basically. So I think it really depends on what their need is, because the need being to explore, to learn, to brainstorm, um to basically come up with new ideas and such. Probably Scrum is not uh, best fit for that. But maybe brainstorming techniques or product vision canvases or user story mapping could be a good technique. um, I would maybe apply techniques or tactics or specific workshops or learning sessions to help the team learn how to do this, and leadership as well. before you start developing something and using Scrum. Because however much you discover and brainstorm at the beginning, that doesn't mean that's how the product will turn up, you know?
Of course not.
It's never like that. Almost never. Yeah.
Okay, and at what size of a company is, because you're a Scrum Master, is a Scrum Master required? Because a startup of two, it's not needed. There's two people, they're just starting out. Let's say if they're bootstrapping. A company of 10, I would say it's not needed in my opinion, because the individuals and managers, can handle the responsibilities of project management, the Scrum responsibilities. But there must be a point that it's detrimental to handle it yourself, and it's better to have someone else come in. So, where do you think that line is?
It's a good question. It's a really good question, and I'm happy you said that. Um, I think so. I would say my opinion is a bit different from yours. Having been a Scrum Master in the past, working with people that need to practice Scrum and be a Scrum Master and wear this hat in their teams. Although they also have this project management aspect of their job, um, right from day zero, I would say. Um, because the Scrum Master accountability or role, however you want to call it, comes with so many hidden features, bonus features, so to say, and things that cannot be witnessed right away, but some of them can. So the way the Scrum Master learns to facilitate meetings versus just a traditional project manager. Uh, how a Scrum Master looks at team health and coaches people and teaches people about Scrum and the framework and how to do that better. How the Scrum Master challenges the people aspect, the people um, aspect of the role is why I would have this person as soon as possible to help you set up the entire system, basically to help you with the tool if they have tools knowledge, of course, like you would have somebody with Atlassian knowledge with Jira and Confluence. That would be very valuable to have in the beginning, and many Scrum Masters already know they have this type of skill because they need to manage their own project settings and configurations in their project. So, however many projects they have, that's probably however many configurations they need to go through. That's a lot for some people. At least I'm looking at my team in Amber. They are just brilliant at doing that. Of course, nobody's perfect, but in such a short amount of time, they have they have managed to really learn and get a hang of things, and it's not easy. It's really not easy. Like
Okay,
to actually go and configure and be an administrator, and I think probably a lot of people will understand when I'm saying project administrator. It comes down to many tiny checkboxes and many settings that need to be made and taken into account so that even your project data is working fine or you don't have a issue on the board or such. Yep.
okay, but still, I'm like, I want to really want a bit more concrete. Like, when is the practical point to, obviously, as soon as possible, but as soon
Okay,
as.
so that was ideal. I give you that. In more practical terms, the minute you have a stable project like a contract or something real going on, I would look at maybe a business analyst or a product owner or both, or depending on the product, maybe somebody from engineering or design, or it depends on the product here. So we'd have one product person, one data and product person, and one sort of a creative or tech oriented person in the very beginning. Probably a UX you would want to have, such as like I would say maybe product owner and a UX, just to say very generically, or instead of UX, somebody from engineering, from programming. Afterwards, if you know you need to staff up the team, then I would hire a scrum master.
Okay, so initially have someone that's obviously in a overall leadership kind of position already that can take on the responsibility. So you're saying, the role is important, but it might not be necessary to have a person that just does that role. They could take on the responsibilities, but know that those are responsibilities they need to take on. Like if there's two, three people in a company, there's going to be one at least that's going to have to take on, finance, for example, because that's going to have to be, done, with,
Exactly. Yeah.
tax and all that stuff, especially if you are, making some money. So, okay, I think that's fair
It
enough.
depends. It depends on how small the company is set up to be. But in the very beginning, I think people that have this type of skill, that they can do accounting, they can do some admin work, they can do an interview, they can do something else. That's probably what people are looking for, or that's probably the assembly in the beginning, when starting out the company.
Okay. And moving on, like talking about like tools and that. One of the issues I had when I was at university, after I finished, not when I was there, but
Hmm.
it was that there was a lot of stuff they just didn't, cover. I feel like they should have talked and maybe gone over one or two project management tools, tools like Jira, tools like, GitLab, GitHub. They did do code repository stuff, but it wasn't that. It was like briefly glanced over, considering how important that is and other aspects of, just working somewhere. You might be there for 8 hours, but I say 1 hour break, 7 hours working, assuming you are doing the full 7 hours and not, just messing about or, just trying to pass the time. In a big company, you'll do probably a fair bit of time in project management tools and get code repository tools, especially when there's problems and errors coming along. So there's so much stuff they just don't cover and teach you. Like, why do you think that is, and how do you think that could be improved to integrate that into, let's say, a games programming course, for example, at uni?
That's a great question. That's really a great question. I think universities and academia, so to say, colleges, they have. I'm just assuming right now. I don't know for sure. My assumption is that we have different understandings of the same notion, or different ways of um, teaching that type of information, because it's two perspectives. So one can be taken literally, one can be taken metaphorically, and it will be two very different results. So I think they're coming in related to this from a different angle. To give you an example, like instead of saying, you could use Jira because it has the Gantt and it has the roadmap feature, and you can do clicks and everything nice and colored. Um, you can have different options lesser than this, and again, it really depends on so many variables.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it does. That is true. But I think there needs to be a bit more, representation of those tools and, talking about them, covering them. And I think one of the ways they could just do it is not necessarily by teaching it, but by having more. Like, this is one thing that I really wanted when I was at university was to work on a project with other people, which we did, but we only did it within, because I did programming with other
Yeah,
programmers, but
yeah.
they had game design, game artists, engine sound engineers. They had those courses for those people, so it would have been great to do a project, if not a big one, but a project with a designer or an artist with a sound
Hmm.
engineer to collaborate. So one, it teaches you how to obviously talk and relate to people, the project management, and then say this is the project management tool that you're going to use, and this is the code repository tool that you're going to use, and part of it, you're going to make sure that you're doing proper commits on a regular basis. You got to make sure you're if it's a 2 month project, doing, let's say, weekly or bi-weekly sprints, and putting the appropriate information on there, and that way you would just learn it, because you have to work with another other people in a team. So I think it's not just about, okay, here's an actual module on how to learn Jira. That
Yeah,
may not be the best way of doing it, and that might actually be a waste of time. But incorporating it within the actual process, because they
within the
did.
material. Yeah,
Yeah,
probably.
because they
Hmm.
didn't teach us how to use PowerPoint or Word or these tools, but we used Word, we used PowerPoint, or word processing, and tools for presenting. We used those tools, and we got better at using those tools just because we had to. So yeah, I think there's so many ways they can do it without one hindering the time they already, because 3 years is a long time, but it's not that long either. Considering how much they're trying to teach you, potentially at some universities. But
Yeah.
yeah, you know, incorporating it within the actual flow, and then maybe even interacting with you on those tools, because instead of interacting with you on a platform like Blackboard or Moodle or some other education online
Yeah.
system, use Slack or Discord, or these tools that you use in industry.
Yeah.
Use them to communicate.
I mean, all the points to you and more even. As I was saying before, to stick to only my experience and my hypothesis at least, and how I learned about things going through high school, going through college, and again then getting into the industry. It comes down to budgets first of all. So if universities do not have the type of budget, imagine, try to put yourself in their shoes for a second. They're giving you the most amount they can, and probably they could do a lot better, but they're giving you, the curriculum is set in such a way that, as I was saying before, yes, they say about project management tools, but they talk about a tool like a hammer, like you would have ganting to solve out some specific issues with timeline and planning and long-term planning. They don't talk about what apps support or what to use specifically, because to be honest, there's so many apps today. There's so many software, websites, mobile apps. You have so many options today. Imagine just how long it would take to give a few examples, to give a reference of some examples in apps. Then people can start complaining the app that I'm using has not been covered in uni. They're just covering the most important mainstream ones like Jira and etc and Microsoft what. So that wouldn't be also helpful probably. So they're sticking to more of a generic approach from a different perspective, still trying to give you a tool that can help you sort that problem out and also understand that part of the learning curriculum, so to say. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I mean that's fair enough. I think those are some good points. So again, moving on, before we spoke, before this podcast, when we spoke a few days ago, you mentioned that you're working on a podcast yourself. You know,
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
talk a little bit about that. So what's that
All
going
right.
to be about?
Um, yeah, thanks for asking. It's going to be about um, gathering teachers, gathering mentors, gathering trainers, gathering any form of role or position, so to say, that they get to teach other people. They get to collaborate. They have a team. They're managers. They're leaders in their companies. You have some sort of interaction with people, or there's a need for you to teach them something, or there's a need for them to learn from you, like for instance, like a gymnasium teacher. What's like for her to handle kids, and as they're growing up and they're changing, ever changing, and it's a hectic time for any teenager basically. But my point is, I want to challenge also, and maybe challenge other people to adopt new ways. Um, so it would be a format with a few people, maybe two, three, four, I don't know yet. Like a fireside chat format where we get to discuss and maybe promote very interesting ideas. To give you an example that I've learned about last year, it's a high school teacher. I don't remember the city she was in, the city she was from, in Romania, actually. And she's become quite famous because she tried to think of how could she solve a worldwide problem in schools. Like, how can you get kids, children, students to read an entire book, to read the uninteresting books, to read all those books that are stuck to the curriculum of learning? You've gone through those yourself. Many probably you didn't like, or you did. It really depends.
I
But
hated them.
there were,
I
there
remember.
you go, there you go. So probably not so many people liked every book that had to be done or read for school. Nobody likes to do assignments and long essays and what's the significance of the title, and that's too deep. So she came up with this very innovative idea, brilliant idea, of using what you have in your hand right now, what you have at hand. And she looked around the room and she saw that every kid was on the mobile phone. So she thought about it for a bit and she brainstormed a bit with a few people, I think. Then she released a challenge before an Easter holiday, I think, or before semesters in school. So she gave out a few titles, like a few books, and said, pair up with, make a team and do a trailer on your phone, do a reenactment, and do a trailer or a teaser trailer that would promote this book. And she said nothing else. She didn't even mention read the book. She didn't focus any effort on or any highlight on or emphasis on that. The result is not only that they were so excited to do it, but it became a rivalry between between classrooms, between other classes, between other schools or high schools. Nowadays, I think it's the third edition. It might have been this year of an actual festival. So it got so big in the last years. This concept got so widespread and adopted in schools and high schools that so many teams from all around the country are really, really refreshing their page when the titles get released. It's one individual title per team, so they have to make sure that they get the title that they want, probably. So they have to be there, and it's in 4 minutes. The last record for her was, I think, 200 titles gone in less than 4 minutes. Everybody had one. All the teams were made, and there's a contest, and everybody gets to show their trailer, and they get to act, they get to reenact, and it's so wonderfully thought out and simple, and that's the kind of ideas I'm trying to explore and try to share among people within the podcast. Um, Yeah, I called it the method that always works.
Okay, that sounds interesting. And when can we expect that to hit Spotify, Google Podcasts, and other platforms?
So the planned release is for Q2 2023. I'll start advertising and marketing a bit earlier, but yeah, that's the current plan. I'm still working on branding a bit. I'm still working on a few polished ideas here and there. And on the tools part as well, I'm also trying to learn how to do exactly what you're doing right now, and how to capture everything and how to edit and looking at videos online. And yeah, I'm taking it step by step because I don't want to rush anything. It has to be impactful. So that's what I'm aiming for: impactful and a true learning experience.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, so like you're saying, obviously, I'm doing this, and this is, the episode we're recording is scheduled to be episode 20. And, obviously, since episode 1, learned a lot about the tools, about editing, and, the management side and research and just, all sorts of stuff. And this is the first episode that I'm doing where, because I've got an office in my house where I do all my work from, and usually I sit on my computer chair at my desk with my desktop, and because I've got like a small two-seater sofa in my office,
Mhm.
I'd fancied for a while being able to do the podcast because it's a bit more, relaxed. I'm not coding. I'm just sort of sitting back and being in a computer chair. It's a pretty nice chair, but it's not the same as sitting on a sofa with your feet up on a,
Clearly, yeah, of
footstool.
course.
So I thought, I want to be able to sit down on the sofa and do this. So this is the first episode where I've got, because on my main computer I've got a blue Yeti, I think the blackout edition, or the Pro mic, not the black one. And then I
Nice.
had a regular blue Yeti mic, which is pretty similar overall, to be fair, which was the first one I had, and that was in the loft because when we moved here, me and my wife last year, a bunch of stuff still in the loft, and I thought, I'll go and grab that. I knew I had another mic arm again, not as good as the one I've got on the other thing, but I knew like you'll get the job done, and I'll buy a better one once I'm doing it consistently on the sofa and it's a bit more warranted. So quickly got this out before our podcast. Set it up, keyboard it up, check the audio. It seemed all right. So yeah, this is the first one that I'm actually doing on my laptop instead of on the
Nice.
desktop, sitting
Nice.
down. And yeah, overall it does feel nice, and that's stuff that you'll just go through again, whether it's tools or where it's set up or where it's sitting down. And I would say as soon as as possible, start recording, doing episodes, because the first episode I recorded, never aired because I didn't
Yes.
use Zencastr.
I'm expecting that.
Yes,
Of
I
course.
mean the episode went really well. It wasn't even that there was a problem with the actual content. The content was amazing. Half of the recording, or just a bit over half, didn't get recorded. So because
Okay.
I use Zencaster now, and I have since episode one. But that particular recording, I use a plugin via Discord, and that was what I was going to be using if that had worked, but it didn't work very well. And as a result, again, less more than half the recording just wasn't present. But again, that's just stuff that learn. And for myself personally, I recorded 5 episodes before I actually launched.
Yeah,
And
you were ready to release something. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
I've learned about getting a buffer of episodes and themes, and depending on your format or guests on the show. So yeah, I'm, as I said, I'm doing my homework and doing my due diligence. It helps a lot, all these tips and all this insight. So thanks a lot for this.
yeah, of course, no problem. So yeah, just get started as soon as you can. But it is important that you do get that buffer, because again, you don't know how long it might take. To get one guest, then the next guest, then the next guest, and your
Exactly.
process will improve. Where you go for, looking for those people will change and improve. So yeah, it's very important, because right now, the podcast law airs every Thursday, 5 a.m. GMT time, and there hasn't been 1 week since episode one that has been missed, and
Nice.
including this.
Congratulations.
I mean, thank you. And hopefully it keeps up. And including this podcast episode, this is scheduled to go live. Going noted here in January, the 26th of January. So
Nice.
so I've got them, so far ready 2 months in advance. Having that buffer is great, because if you need to go on holiday and you really want to disconnect, you've got that buffer. If you're ill, you've got that buffer, having them scheduled in advance as well. So yeah, I mean, that's really useful. And obviously you've got, my email, you've got my number. Just ask me if you have any, tips as well, because there's a few other things I want to share, but I'll share them afterwards, with yourself, what you can, use to really
Yeah,
enhance the
thank you.
process.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being so kind. Thank you.
No, no problem. Okay, so yeah, going back, so that's my more specific questions done. I have some, generic questions, fun ones that I like to ask. So
Go
starting
for
with
it.
the first one, what would you rather have, 5 million upfront or 500,000 a year for the rest of your life, and why?
Um
And let's say US dollars, just to keep it.
yeah, it doesn't really matter. Sure. US dollars. I would definitely go with the second version
Hmm.
because there is a continuous supply and stability and predictability. Whereas in the first scenario, I have sort of a limited amount because that amount is just huge. But still, it's limited. So I would definitely go for stability and um, predictability of payment because that's what we're talking about. Instead of having one big chunk of money and then just blowing it, or maybe not even blowing it on stuff, but it's limited. So, of course, more comfortably would be to have a continuous supply.
Continuous supply.
More desirable, so to say. Yeah, at
Yeah,
least in my opinion, that's what I would choose.
yeah.
Interesting questions. Yeah.
And I think it depends on what stage of your life you're at, how old you are as well. So yeah, because different people I speak to, I think most do say 500,000 a year, but there is the odd one that has said 5 million up front. Usually the ones that are on the younger end of the scale say 500,000. The ones again not old. I haven't had anyone that's
Yeah.
been old on the podcast yet, but the slightly older, maybe more seasoned ones, they're probably more likely to say 5 million. Again, not all of them, but just some of them. Okay,
Yeah.
so
Makes sense. Makes sense.
yeah,
It also depends, as you said, to your point. It really depends on where you are in your life.
hmm
Let's just say you have somebody sick in your family. Probably would definitely want to go with an emergent, one-time big amount of money because that solves your big issue now.
yeah,
But then again, maybe the second version is not. It doesn't cover everything, or you have some big plan or whatever. It can be that. Yeah.
yeah, of course.
None
So
of them are wrong, of course.
no, of course. It's more about your mindset and how you're leveraging both of them because you could easily waste 500,000 a year and do nothing with it, or waste 5 million up front. But likewise, in both scenarios, you could do a lot with it. You could invest the 5 million or most of it when you get it, and you could just be bringing you in 500,000 plus the initial investment as well that's growing. Or the 500,000 you could be enjoying it a bit, investing it, growing it, learning, and all that stuff. But so yeah, it depends on how you approach it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Favorite board game?
Favorite bowl game?
No, board game. Sorry.
Board game.
Yeah.
Favorite board game. I've been playing. My girlfriend has been showing me quite a bit of board games lately. Uh, Favorite board game. I don't know if I have a favorite board game. I have a tough time saying favorite something because I I usually tend to like many things in that category. So it's tough to pick because it's different experiences and they're all nice. The top ones at least.
Yeah.
Something that I've played since childhood is backgammon,
Okay.
and sometimes chess as well, but mostly it was backgammon. It's I don't know in other countries or other cultures how much of that game they play, but at least here locally, I grew up learning that game and other games related to that. I would say that has been the most continuous board game and Monopoly. I would say maybe, but yeah,
Okay. Fair enough. Yeah. I mean, as a kid, we had a bunch of wooden board games. I think we had one that can convert into multiple different board games, and one of the ones was backgammon. I remember trying to play it, and I always found it a bit, confusing because I was always a good chess
it was.
player. I
It
mean,
is. It is confusing. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, I was always a good chess player. I played chess often, and played checkers if somebody wanted to play that. I enjoyed that as well. But overall,
checkers as
preferred,
well. Yeah,
preferred chess. But yeah, I think with the thing with backgammon is nobody that I knew that I wanted to play with really knew how to play it. So I was just either playing on my own on the computer or trying to play with someone who didn't know, I didn't know, we're young and we're just trying to figure things out. And yeah, whereas with chess, there was plenty of people around that
Yeah.
at least knew the rules, even if they weren't good at it. They knew the rules of how to actually play. Whereas with backgammon, and because all the pieces they look the same pretty much, don't they? Whereas with
Yeah,
chess,
it's black and white, of course.
yeah. Well, whereas with chess, okay, there's a queen, there's a king.
Yeah.
There's some
There are roles
difference.
attributed to each piece, so to say, or
Yes,
to the same piece multiple times.
yeah, and like the weather, and even if you don't know the actual names, just based on the starting position, you can be like, okay, that's the castle because it's starting
Yes,
in the bottom,
exactly.
left and right corner. Or they're the pawns because they're the ones at the front. Like it was a lot easier to associate. Yeah, I mean, I have not thought about backgammon for years. I mean, years and years. But now that you mentioned it, I wouldn't mind going back and trying to learn that and have a go. Because again, I've got
Yeah,
a multi wooden set thing, and it's got backgammon. So yeah, I think I'm gonna go and
yeah.
try and learn it.
That's the one I'm talking about. That's the old school stuff.
Yeah.
The wooden set. But what I discovered recently, and I knew of this since many years, but I forgot about it. It's the game of Ur. I'm not sure if you know of it. It's one of the most oldest games
The
in the
game
world.
of what's it called?
Of Ur, UR.
You on? Okay, I've just had a quick
Yeah.
Google. I mean,
It's a
um,
super simple board game where you need to move pieces, like round pieces in black and white, and you need to move them through some how should I say, swim lanes, particular swim lanes, and you can take each other out, and you need to plan, and it's super engaging and it's fun. So I would recommend you or anybody else try that out. You can
okay.
find it online for free to play. You can play with somebody else as well. Like I can play locally with somebody else on my laptop, and probably I can also play online with other people.
Okay.
Depends on which one you find. Yeah,
Okay, I'll
but
check
the
it out.
actual board game, physical one, I think it's very, very engaging and interesting.
Yeah,
Probably the more people you have, probably the more interesting it gets.
I've just had a quick Google, and I've just gone onto the shopping section on Google. It seems to be a relatively expensive board game.
Yeah, as I said, it's if that's the most accessible version, like the online digital version of it,
Hmm.
probably free. I played it for free many times by now. But if you're really keen on having it like a physical format, probably you need to drop some money. But it depends on everybody's passion and how much they like that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'll try it online first before spend this much money because with chess you can spend probably £5-10 and get a board. Then you can obviously spend thousands of pounds, but you can get cheap boards. Same with checkers. Same with a bunch of stuff. But with Game of Earth, it doesn't seem so. It seems a bit more specialist. But I definitely check out an online version.
You
I
can
watch some
create a
YouTube.
paper version of it, a cardboard version,
Yeah.
like many people do. You
Okay.
just copy the spaces and the board, and basically you're done. You can even play with coins or I don't know buttons or something, whatever you come up with. It doesn't even have to be round. You know what I mean?
Yeah, just something to distinguish it. Okay, though.
Yeah.
That's nice to learn about it because I never heard of that game, the game of. I'll definitely check that out. It was nice to learn about a new one. So,
Yeah.
favorite video game?
Favorite video game? I'm going to say the current and the past favorite video game. But yeah, that's why I played them because I really liked them so much. So the last one I played was Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Odyssey.
Okay,
I looked at Valhalla, the new one, and of course the latest release from them. Um, and now, right now, currently, I'm playing something a lot more relaxing, so to say. Sometimes in co-op, sometimes just on my own missions. It's called SnowRunner. It's a very interesting evolution from an earlier game from the same company called Mud Runner. It's a game where you have variety of trucks and areas and maps, and you need to basically transport all types of a variety of types of materials to do some sort of missions, and you get currency and you can buy more trucks and you can unlock and parts, and it's relaxing because I just get to drive and look at nice pictures and animations while I'm kind of um, trying to get away from work mindset and take a mental break. It helps. It's relaxing.
Okay. And here's a question that I always love asking, and it's a nice one to hear people's opinions on it. Does money buy you happiness, and why?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not for me. I also don't work for money, so I would say, in a funny way, companies might have a hard time um keeping me, because if I don't look at the pay, then I would have to look at other things like culture and psychological safety and many other things.
Okay. And
I'm not sure that answers your question.
I mean, not exactly. I mean, okay, no is the answer, but why would you say money doesn't make you happy?
For me, at least, the material side of things is less important than the inner side, so to say. I learned about this quote a long time ago. To try to build a kingdom within versus the kingdom outside. So the more I noticed that I would focus on getting material objects and gains more than the necessary stuff, it didn't really lead anywhere. It's just having more stuff. But in comparison to building something from within, for yourself at least, to start with, and together with other people, it's so rewarding, and it it's a very alive experience, and it makes you feel that you have a purpose, and that purpose is one that you are aligned with. Because objects and material things can just go in a second, such as us, of course. But then again, if that ever were to happen, and when it will happen, people, I think, remember other people and think of other people instead of their Mercedes or, I don't know, any other material gain. I'm not saying don't invest in that. I'm just saying be smart about it and be fair with yourself. And maybe if you cannot help other people, in the process, that's also great.
Okay, yeah, I think that's fair enough. I think that's a good point that you make. That those stuff is fine to focus on and to go for, but it's not everything. And obviously having a life of being able to help others, help yourself, be happy, be healthy,
Yes,
and
first yourself.
yes,
Be-
and have
First
meaningful
yourself.
relationships as well. Because one of the things that a lot of people can do, most people in the world, is just be healthier.
Yes, and it starts from it. It really starts from our way of thinking in the mind.
yeah, like eat less or eat better, or eat more fruit instead of chocolate, or eat at better times. You might even not be
Yeah, just be more
changing.
effective. Be more effective at preparing your meals,
Yeah,
or be more assertive when you go shopping, or be more decisive when you go shopping. So you don't end up getting too many sweets in your basket, and you want to stick to just one chocolate bar per week, or I don't know what other people choose.
yeah, of course, of course. And okay, so that's my questions done. Just one last one. What advice would you give to someone that's looking to become a tester, or a scrum master, or get into the industry like yourself? What advice would you give?
um I think everything starts from curiosity and will, but most importantly, curiosity. If you can, if you have this type of skill already, identified in yourself, that's the most important one. That's I'm a very curious person by nature, and you can imagine that got me into trouble many times in the past. So learning from that, trying to make it into a positive learning tool, I started not to be curious about everything anymore. And because, of course, the nature of my mind and the way I think and probably was brought up is I have to learn something all the time. So not focusing on everything and just like laser pointing this curiosity pipeline, so to say, this vacuum, it really worked like a vacuum. So I would say curiosity is the most important first thing that you would have to have, and I would recommend having because it's the one thing that you start from, and it's the one thing that keeps you going all the time.
I agree. Curiosity, be willing to question. But I think you made a good point where if you're too curious or too openly curious, it's not the best thing either. Because there's a time.
Maybe, yeah, yeah. It really depends how you position yourself when you are curious. Like, what are you curious about?
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to remember or know all the different types of ants or how they make babies or
Mm.
why such in-depth knowledge that you don't really get to talk to people about.
Yeah, yeah, and also it's about the time and place. 'Cause and what is that knowledge that you may potentially gain from being curious in the moment? Like, what's it actually going to,
Everything,
you know, re-
everything you have to gain.
yeah, like what's it going to, provide for you? Like, is it even meaningful? Because I've met people where they're just like, it's almost annoying where they're just constantly asking, you know, questions or trying to. It's almost like they're trying to
Yeah,
prove people wrong, and
yeah.
instead of being curious, they're trying to prove people wrong, and that's the wrong approach because the person might be right or you might be wrong, and I don't think that's necessarily the right type of curiosity or even curiosity itself. When they're just or they're just not asking it in the right time or to the right people because sometimes it can be a bit sensitive. The sensitive topics as well. And yeah, I think that's not good. And I think sometimes people can hide behind the mask of, I was just being curious. I'm just trying to find out. And it's like, no, sometimes you're just being, like an asshole. Like, yeah, I met people where that's literally all they're being, even though they'll say, oh, yeah, I'm just curious. It's like,
Yeah,
it was a curiosity. Like what you're saying, what you're asking in the moment you're asking, it's hurtful. And when they're constantly pushing it because they haven't got an answer.
yeah. I really know what you're saying, and it's something a lot of people go through, and it's what you see as an output from other people as well. Anywhere, it doesn't even matter the industry or the scenario. But I think it's after looking at people and looking at anthropology and social dynamics and everything, it really seems that there's a lack of a variety of skills. But to be more precise, like curiosity is a skill if you think about it.
Mm,
And like any other skill, you have to train it. You have to practice being curious. You're not just curious. Some people are by nature,
yeah.
just because that's how they're brought up, or that's how they think, or that's their nature, default nature. But to people that need to foster and adopt curiosity and learn how to be curious, there's that expression, practice makes perfect. Well, I think practice makes permanent,
Mm,
and there is no perfect. What is that? I have nothing more to learn from that. So I want to do a very good job instead of doing a perfect job, doing the best job I can every single time instead of aiming for the perfect job or perfect output or perfect way to do things. It's we self sabotage a lot, and it's one of the topics I plan to cover in depth in my podcast.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that would be definitely a good topic to cover in your podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Like people, I've done it myself. Definitely do self sabotage, even if it's as simple as creating a list of tasks to do for the day. Let's say I create 8, 10 tasks. Let's say they're feasible as well. So let's rule out the idea. Oh, I can't even physically get them done, and I'm just not managing it properly. But let's just say they're
Yeah.
technically feasible, then I'll get to the end of the day and I've done 6. Instead of kicking myself and saying I haven't done the other 4, it's better to reflect and say, why didn't I do the other 4? Okay, something came up, unavoidable. I was only able to do 6. Fine, continue tomorrow. Rinse and repeat. Or I could have managed things better, or I could have cut certain things
Yeah.
shorter, for example, rearrange. But again, just knowing that it is a process, because it's like exercise. No matter how intense your exercise is, for one day, it's not gonna make that much difference in your life. Like you could lift all the weights in the world, you could do all the running, all the walking, all the cardio, all the whatever. Same with food. It doesn't matter how good your diet is for that one day. If you're not consistent,
Exactly.
and again, it's better to be 80% there in terms of diet every day than to be 100% there one day. It's
Absolutely.
just
I
good.
I completely agree.
Yes,
Yeah.
same with exercise. It's better to walk a mile a day than to walk for the rest of your life. Obviously, that's still very good, but like a mile a day for the rest of your life than to walk, I don't know, 10 miles that one day, or ten
Yeah.
miles every month, for example, or every few months. It's being consistent with it and knowing that okay, you're gonna have hiccups, things are going to come up, things are going to go wrong. And that's just life in general.
Yeah. And even for people that have a disability with walking,
Hmm.
I would recommend just do some sort of physical movement as often as you can, but it has to be consistent. So that's why, even going back to the curiosity point, that's why I put curiosity the first top skill to foster, to learn, and to practice. Because from curiosity, you get to learn what you like and what you don't like, what you can do when you can't. So then it becomes you adopt consistency, you adopt reason, you adopt meaning, resonance, and you see value, and then probably start adopting and doing that better and better.
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, that's definitely, a good way to, live life. I mean, it's like development of a product. It's an iterative process. It takes time.
absolutely.
You'll
Yeah,
learn your lifestyle, the people around you, what you want to achieve, how you want to live, your body, the way you approach things is different and it will change and to everyone else. So you just iterate, you just figure something that works for you, but know that that may work for you for 10 years, but after that you might need to change it. Like whether it's
exactly.
diet.
Change.
Yeah, like
That's very well that you mentioned this.
yeah,
So first, it comes curiosity, and what I'm trying myself to get to. I always think I'm not there yet because I need to learn more. Because I'm curious.
mm,
I'm curious to explore more. So I think if you can get to pair curiosity with change and understand change, the concept of change and what that means, then I think you're really, really good to go. And I said this to my team as well in the past. We work with change a lot from clients, with scope, and you know the drill, of
yeah,
course.
of course.
Yeah. So change can come from many, many areas. I had a quote for them in a summit that we did last year for the entire team, and one of the topics was change management, how to improve and how to think of change and all these things. And there's one quote that really stood out and I really liked. It goes like this: to respond to change means you need to show up prepared to do things differently each time. So there's a lot of meaning into just a sentence. I'll say that again. To respond to change means you need to show up prepared to do things differently each time. Each time there's a change, you cannot assume that you already know. but you can be prepared mentally. It's a way of thinking. I'll let you think about that for a second. It's it has quite a bit of meaning, and I'm actually curious, how do you see change?
Yeah, I mean, for me, change is knowing that things won't be perfect. Things aren't perfect forever. Things have to, alter, change. Like by definition, for things to change, the processes have to, change. For you to become better, you have to become different, even if that's only a little bit different. Something has to change. So if I want to be healthier, something has to change. Even if I'm already healthy, if I want to be healthier, I need to change something, whether that's I will do some exercise, I'll do some dieting, or maybe it's just
Exactly.
meditation, or some more positive style of thinking. But then also understanding the flip side, that just because you are open to change doesn't mean you should always be trying to change and looking to change.
And implement the change. Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, because it's like, when we was talking about, testing and, all these management tools, for
Yeah.
example, just because they're available to you and you can use them at any point doesn't mean you should do. Knowing when to use them, how to use them, because like, the note taking applications,
And the why is the most important.
yes, like, why are you trying to change? Because if you don't have a strong enough why, like a strong enough sort of narrative
Hmm.
to strive for, then you're going to eventually say, "Oh, I don't want to do this anymore." Especially if it's
Yeah.
something that takes time, and it especially if it's something like exercise where that is an ongoing life. You know, it's a forever process.
Yeah.
So if you don't have a strong enough why, and that why might be health, that why might be to look better or to look a way that other people find more appealing, it might
Yeah.
not be. Like I know people that aren't in the best shape, and they're not, or like I had a friend that who wasn't in the best shape. He was fat, and he used to eat really badly, and he didn't care. He genuinely had, as far as I'm aware, any concern about how other people felt about him in terms of the way he looks. But when he got a dog, he started walking not for himself but for the dog, and he's
For the
kept
dog. Yeah.
yeah, and he's kept that up because it was a necessity for the dog, and it's something he enjoys. As a result, he's lost a lot of weight, and he
Yeah.
and he he looks better now. But again, it wasn't something he did
On
specific.
purpose.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but he understood that change had to occur because now he had a pet. He had something that he had to change for, and he's
Yeah.
kept it up as a result.
Yeah. I still encourage people to, when they have, like, maybe scenarios like taking the pet, having a new pet example. If you're adopting something new and you were not doing it before, try to look at that. Maybe when you can capture yourself doing that, and become aware of it. It's also super helpful and healthy to think, how is this helping me? How can I maximize value from this? Like, okay, I'm gonna walk the dog. So okay, I've identified that I'm probably gonna lose some weight. What am I gonna do with that? You know, how will that level of fitness, so to say, will help me in 6 months? Because the dog's not gonna go away. I'm gonna have it forever. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So I'm gonna be more fit, or up to a certain point of fitness, and like you identify, hey, I could go on doing this, and I couldn't do it before, and I could actually start taking up running, and or I could go much easier to the beach because guess what? I'm not gonna be as overweight as I was before. So there are a bunch of different things that you can already identify if you take the opportunity, if you become aware of the opportunity of moments like this. Doesn't have to be about a pet, it can be about anything, but like a 2-minute reflection, it can help a lot.
oh yeah, for sure. I think that's part of change is reflection, being able to, look back and then not being, I think a lot of people are afraid to change back from the change, afraid to revert because it's almost like they are saying to the world, I was wrong about this. And even if you are wrong, like I see so many people that'll do something, you can tell it's probably not the best thing, but because they've gone down that route, they just don't want to go back now because it's a reversal of what they've done, whether it's career, whether it's, relationship, whether it's something to do with the house or car or exercise or whatever it is. Instead of saying, you know what, I was wrong about this, or there was a different way I could have approached you, or I should just go back, they rather just hammer on at this one thing, the same way, just because they don't want to revert back and have that embarrassment effectively from other people.
Yeah, it's as I was saying before. It's so much related to our internal psychology and how we view the world and how we sabotage ourselves and what our strengths and values are. But to go back to this a bit and maybe close off your question, um, something that can really help people, at least in my recommendation, is exploring the why through Simon Sinek's book, like the Golden Circle, if you know of that, and related to change and how to think of change and how to. It's a simple, easy to read book and pretty straightforward. It's a book called Switch by Chip and Dan Heath. Um, it's a blue cover book. Um, I yeah, I have many more recommendations, but since we're only talking about the why and how to think of change, I would recommend looking into these books.
Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely get. What I'll do, because we're gonna wrap up the podcast now. I'll get your socials. Anything in any other portfolio, any other links that you want to share. I'll get any book recommendations that you want to share that you think will be useful for people that have listened to this episode podcast. I'll put that in the
Sure.
description, so all listeners out there can check this out. So yeah, I just want to thank Vlad for taking the time to come on, talk to me for 2 hours, and it's been a good podcast. I've had developers, I've had designers, first scrum master and tester on the podcast, so it's good to have that experience talked about as well. So yeah, just thank you, Vlad, for the time that you spent today.
You are very, very welcome. I can't. I now noticed that it's been 2 hours. Wow, it's been a very, very nice experience and a very pleasant chat. Thank you for the invitation, first of all. Um, to help on your description as well. I did those in the past. However, since I'm with Amber, I'm no longer doing a Scrum Master or any tester role. Um, as I said before, I'm trying to expand my knowledge. I'm trying to grow, and I'm trying to go to other different levels of knowledge, so to say, and experience.
Yeah,
So yeah, that helped a lot. But to your point as well, um, I really liked your questions, and I think you have a pretty good, successful podcast here. Yeah, it's
thank you.
nice episodes. So keep on doing that, and thank you everybody for listening. And yeah, thank you for the opportunity to have this discussion and share some ideas.
Yeah, thank you for those kind words, Vlad. And just before we wrap up, I just want to say, that's one thing I did notice, that you had a wide variety of experience, and it wasn't like, oh, you was jumping from one junior to another junior to another junior. Right? Like you was getting senior in each one, but then you're going to a different aspect. And I feel like you're tester, then you're scrum master, but then obviously I feel like this the knowledge that you've gained from testing and using certain tools, you can take that over, and then what you.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, you can. And of course, I would recommend people to just start out with something,
Hmm.
and you will figure it out along the way, what you would like to do and what you're good at, basically. Yeah, it's been a very interesting and helpful learning experience so far. It still is. Um, yeah. So yeah, I'm having quite a bit of fun.
That sounds good.
In a different way now, of course. In a different way.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, it's good to experience new stuff. Okay.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, thank you, Vlad. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If want to check out the other podcast episodes, feel free to, on your relevant platforms, Spotify, Google, Apple, all those platforms, and appreciate a 5-star review on whatever platform you're using. So thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.